Hi, this is Robert Polinick, the owner of Bruno Iron Gym. In today's video, I wanted to share some thoughts that I'm thinking through and technique aspects I'm thinking through when doing some common arm training exercises. So I'll show you a few of my favorite movements and what I think of while performing these movements. The first one is a tricep press down. Now I'm doing this with a rope grip, and I like this because it allows me to start with my hands close, and then I can get a full contraction by pulling my arm open. What I like about this is typical tricep press downs where you have kind of a fixed pathway straight up and down. You'll get the outside, the horseshoe part of the tricep pretty well. If you do overhead tricep extensions that are in a fixed width, you're going to get the long head pretty well. What I like about this is it kind of feels like you get everything. So starting in a narrow position gets a nice stretch to the horseshoe and the large part of the tricep, the long head. And then as you're pulling apart and down, it really builds this external portion, the lower portion that comes out underneath the t-shirt. So in my opinion, I like this because I feel like it gets all three parts of the tricep. Now I'm doing it where I'm supported against the post. I have a Sornex Apex rack. There's no cable or anything on the outside of this, so it makes it nice because I can just lean back into it. So if you have that ability in whatever machine you're using, it does help. I like the strictness of the position. So I'll bend my legs, can't see that, but I'm bending my legs a little bit, and I'm leaning back into the machine. So if the machine were to move, I would fall. So I have my weight back into it. I'm going to push my head back, not to where it's uncomfortable, just make sure I don't hit myself with the cable. And then I'm going to accept tension by bringing my knuckles kind of down right in front of my chest. Now I have the muscles loaded, and then as I'm contracting, I'm thinking of pushing and sweeping my hands out. So my knuckles are going to come up to where they're touched lightly together, and then I push out at the bottom. Again, what I like is this feels like it targets all three parts of the tricep to get a really good full growth. When I'm doing the warm-up sets and some of the first working sets, I'll get this nice flex and squeeze at the bottom, like I'm trying to flex it, like I'm trying to break the muscle. Then as I would get fatigued, maybe the last one or two sets, I'll go ahead and just kind of do quick at the bottom. So this would be like a flex like that. But at the beginning, I like getting a nice strong squeeze and contraction. And this really lights up the triceps and gets all three areas. And like I said, especially that area outside of the t-shirt underneath here, really good growth there. So doing tricep press downs with the rope grip, that's what it looks like for the majority of my sets. Nice and slow, just having the knuckles come up, almost touch at the top. Then I'm pulling the handles apart and really flexing everything on the back side of the arm. So that would be the kind of inner workings, the inner thoughts while doing that. The movement that I usually like to start with for biceps is a cable curl. And I'll do this where the cable is set higher than the bottom. I typically have it at my knees or waist, somewhere in there. And what I like about this is when you're doing the movement, if I accept weight load here, the muscle is stretched and there's some tension, but it's not much. It's a lower weight load than when I start to curl and now my forearm is perpendicular to the cable. This is way more weight load. So this is tension but lighter. Then I squeeze and I get a lot of tension in this more tight contracted position. What I like about it is when I'm warming up, it's nice to do a variation that's actually lighter in the full extension because it warms up your bicep connections, your bicep tendons. It kind of warms up the elbow better than if you start with something that's very aggressive in the stretch position as your first movement. Now I'll do this even with young clients or clients who haven't had injury issues, but I do work with clients who have had bicep issues, shoulder injuries, and other related things, to where if you reduce the connective tissue stress in the first movement, they can have a greater total volume load in the workout And usually they can go heavier in their second and third movements because you've properly warmed up the connective tissue. So for this one, a couple things I'm thinking of is I'm specifically doing this to pump up the muscle. I want to get the biceps super pumped. And then the second movement I do is one that emphasizes the stretch position. In order to get this pumped, I tend to focus on the upper outer portion. That is the nice, like aesthetic wise, it creates a nice separation between the shoulder and the bicep. There's a couple components in order to do that. The first thing is when I'm curling this, I want to think of the first movement as lifting my arm. This is going to sound odd. I am going to like bend my elbow as I do it, but I want my upper arm bone to lift a little bit as my hand comes back. What this does is by that little lift, I'm already activating my bicep up here at the shoulder connection. So I'm going to activate and then curl the weight, and then man, do you get one hell of a squeeze right there. So it is really good for building that. So you want to have a little bit of an elevation as you're curling. So it looks like a smooth one motion, but there is actually those separate parts to it where there's a little bit of an elevation as you're curling. The other component is my hand is going to be slightly angled. Rather than having my hand totally flat, I'm going to slightly angle my hand. Now, how much you angle, the clients I've worked with, they'll find if I'm totally neutral, I'm not going to get that upper portion of bicep. I'm going to work a lot of that brachioradialis down here. So I don't want to be totally neutral. For me, a 45-degree angle is the most I would angle inward. I'm looking a little bit outside of a 45, but not totally flat. So again, a little bit of an elevation, that curl, and then that angle is helping me curl my hand where my thumb is coming a little closer to me than my pinky is. So lift, curl, and then squeeze. So just like with the tricep movement, when I'm in the peak contraction, I flex and squeeze. Now you'll see I'm using my other hand, I'm using my pointer and middle finger to pressure and kind of touch there. It helps build the mind-muscle connection to that specific spot, so I can feel that muscle contract and squeeze. And this gets a wonderful, wonderful pump in the bicep. So I'll sit here, and usually I do sets of 20, where I'm warming up everything and getting a really good squeeze in that muscle. So this is typically the first thing I'll do for biceps, because then the muscle's pumped up, it's ready to go, connective tissues are ready, and then whatever I choose next, I'm going to feel it more in the muscles rather than the joint, so it sets me up for a really good workout. Now moving on to my second movement, so I'll show you the bicep first. I have the cable stations all the way down to the bottom. I'm actually going to be doing what I call a cable crossover standing bicep curl. On this rack, this is Sore Next Apex rack, so you have a squat rack in the middle, cable stations on the side. But if you're a gym, wherever you train, you have access to a traditional like dual cable stack where there's like towers on each side with a pull-up bar across the middle. That would be typically used for cable crossovers, which is a chest exercise. So you could use that type of machine. So to get set up, I'm going to grab the handle on the bottom on each side. And the weight that we would choose, I'm trying not to talk when I'm bending over because the microphone will get all screwed up. But the weight that we choose is heavy enough to create damage, but light enough that we can do the form feeling safe. Now, this position is definitely a risk, but it's super helpful. Essentially, what I'm going to be doing is getting in between the stations, and then I'm going to rotate my hands pointing up. And I'm going to do a bicep curl from there. Now, this is actually really hard, or at least for me it is. But this is the motion I want, where I get a full stretch at the bottom, and I come up and get a good full squeeze at the top. So at the top, I can't really bring my hands in anymore. I want to make sure that my hands are slightly wider than my elbows, so I maintain bicep tension. So again, it's a very good stretch and squeeze. I'm trying to rotate my arms so my elbow joint points down towards the floor. So I'm going to lift my chest arch my back a little bit and make sure that I get a good stretch and a good squeeze. If I feel that the weight is too heavy to get a safe stretch, then I went too heavy. You want to make sure you get this full stretch out of the bottom, so that way you can really pull open the muscle once you have it pumped up from that first movement. Now, the key with this exercise is I really take my time. I try not to get ugly with anything, try not to sway or move my body. If I have any of those cheating mechanics, I'm probably not isolating the bicep well anymore. Probably using front shoulder, body momentum, stuff like that. And I really don't want that because that's not going to help my biceps grow. So it's better to stay light where you can feel confident in the movement and stay very controlled and strict. The benefit of having that pump movement first and then getting into this stretch is that simple sequence. By pumping the muscle first and trying to pull that muscle open in that bottom stretch position creates extra damage. So you don't have to worry about extra weight and lose technique by doing the formatting in this way where you get a pump movement and then a stretch movement. That's your intensity magnifier. That's the thing that's going to create the damage, so you don't have to chase after bigger, heavier weight. So that's this exercise. Cable crossover standing bicep curl. Stay nice and strict. Get a really good full stretch. And then at the top, come and squeeze, but keep your hand slightly outside of your elbow, so that way you always have tension on the bicep. For my second tricep movement, I'm going to be doing an incline bench one-arm tricep extension. So I have it set here at between 45 to 60 degrees. Typically I would pick somewhere around there, maybe down as low as 45, high as 60. But the idea is I'm doing a one-arm overhead tricep extension, and I want to lay back enough that I'm not standing straight upright and I can use body momentum. I want it to be strict, so I have my weight kind of laying back into the bench. Now this movement it's like the other ones we've gone through, it's very strict, but the point is that the position allows you to hyper-focus into the muscle, create an enormous amount of isolative stress. So we want them to be strict, so that way we can keep 100% of the focus, 100% of the intensity into the singular muscle that we're looking for, bicep and triceps. Now, if I want just big, heavy tricep movements, I'm going to be doing that on chest day. So if I want to grow my triceps through like heavy dips, chest presses, maybe even like a close grip press, I'll do that on like chest day or a shoulder day, some day where I have those big, heavy movements built in. I'm not going to use my arm day for the big, heavy compounds. On arm day, I like to do a lot of isolative work because the big, heavy compounds are already done on like chest day or shoulder day. You don't need to double those up. We want to double up the volume into our biceps and triceps, but we want to make sure that we don't over-stress the joints, we don't over-include a bunch of other muscles that are going to take away from the biceps and triceps. So staying strict with these is going to be maybe a hit to the ego, but I don't feel that way because I could care less what weight I'm using, I just want big muscles. So if a lighter weight helps me build bigger muscles, then great, that's just easier to do. Less stress in the joints, easier to pick up, easier to move around. I don't care how much I can one-arm overhead tricep extension, who gives a shit? No one really has to do that. So if I'm looking for ego, this is definitely the wrong type of training, but it works really well to build big muscles. So let me just pick something here. I'll grab the 20s, or a 20 because it's one arm. So I'm going to lean back into the bench, and the working arm I'm going to extend over my head and let the weight of the dumbbell kind of pull my arm back. My upper arm is going to be pointing up towards the ceiling, and then I want to extend and squeeze up from there. So I'm taking the dumbbell from my shoulder up overhead. Now you can see my elbow goes forward a little bit. This is what you can do when you want to get like a little bit of a heavier overload, or you can keep your upper arm stable and really think of reaching back behind you, which is my preferred way. So I try to keep my upper arm pointing straight to the ceiling and let that weight pull my arm going back that way. Let me switch sides. Hopefully the microphone doesn't mess up since it's on the working arm now. But I'm going to let that weight pull that arm back, squeeze, back, squeeze. So at the top, I'm trying to make sure that my arm still angles behind me, so that way there's still tension in the muscle. I don't want to have my arm straight up towards the ceiling because now I kind of relax, just hang out. If my arm angles back a little bit, now there's tension, and that would start to wear out my tricep even if I tried to stay in that locked out position. So that's what I'll do, switch back and forth. And typically I'll do reps of anywhere from 10 to 20. I tend not to go lighter than, lower than 10 reps. Every once in a while maybe I'll try just to see how it feels. But this is the position for the second movement, which is an incline bench, one arm overhead tricep extension. So long name, but a really good movement. A fun extra tip for the bicep curls is the hand placement for the handle. So I wanted to share that because it can really help better isolate the bicep in the sense of reducing forearm involvement, and to whatever degree it would be significant, it lengthens the lever arm, it lengthens the distance from the handle to your elbow, which can make the weight feel heavier, and in my mind it helps you give more of an isolative feel to the movement. So typically whenever we're grabbing a handle, you would think of putting the handle in the palm of your hand like this, and then you would wrap your hand around that, and that's going to pinch the base of your fingers, that skin in there. It's going to pinch kind of that in there, but it's locked in, it's secured, it's in the palm of your hand. And then typically we would do bicep curls like that. The downside to this is it really engages your forearm muscles, so it gives you a really good grip, but it can take away some of the biceps. So what I do when I'm doing bicep curls is I actually will hold the handle in my fingers. Now I don't leave my hand open like this, but I place the handle into my fingers like this, not my palm, my fingers, and then I'll close down like where I'll roll that in like that. And now when I curl, it's more pulling through my fingers, which reduces the forearm and isolates better the bicep. So if you hold the handle in your fingers, again, you don't have to leave your hand open, but just to show it, is if you curl in your fingers, this gets a much better isolation rather than where if I slid it up into the palm of my hand, grabbed it as hard as I could, and then did curls, that's going to get a lot more forearm involvement. So I thought that would be fun to share, is these little nuances that can make a big difference, especially with the mind-muscle connection of a movement, and then the quality of the stimulus, and especially if you add that up over time. So for bicep curls, if you've never tried this, I would definitely give it a shot, is to put the handle in the base of your fingers first, wrap your finger, and then actually like curl it with your fingers into your hand, and then curl from there. You're gonna have a much better bicep connection. I just talked about how the grip position can make a difference from bicep curls, so I want to show the same thing for the tricep movement. Oop, there we go. So I got it in position. You can see here when it's resting on my shoulder that my hand is towards the top part of the handle. The base of my hand, the pinky side base, is going to be pushing up into the top plate. So when I'm doing this movement, I actually want to think of extending, so stretch and extend. You can see if I pause, my hand is at the top of the handle rather than in the middle. This is the same thing as it helps to isolate the working muscle. If my hand is in the middle, I have to use a lot of forearm muscles to kind of hold that position. If my hand is at the top, I can relax my forearm a little bit and focus more on my triceps. So I'll keep this movement where I'm flexing at the top, but I keep my hand at the top of the dumbbell. That is really going to help isolate the tricep and make sure that the forearm muscle isn't taking away from the tricep stimulus. My third and final movement for triceps is going to be an overhead extension. Now I know we just did one, but this changes the angle, changes the feel, and still allows us to get that great isolation into the triceps. And I also like getting positions that are different than traditional presses. So dumbbell chest presses, even overhead presses. I like to kind of play with positions and variety to where you can, like the first movement we had the arm down next to the body, full extension, nice strong position. Last one we had the arm overhead, reaching back like this. This one we're gonna pick somewhere in the middle, in the sense of I'm gonna have my arm, I'm gonna use my support arm, my other arm for support. I'm gonna have my arm out to the side, and I'm going to do an extension, which is like an overhead extension, but it's more in like a natural position for my shoulder. I don't have my arm, my elbow pointing like to the front of me, which involves a lot of rotation in the shoulder. This is a nice natural position. Now I am trying to rotate down, but it's more of a natural, comfortable position. And this helps to isolate the tricep in a little bit of a different manner than the previous overhead extension. So this one you can see I'm going nice and slow. I'm using my other arm for support to have a nice, solid, strong position. And the working arm, I'm letting it stretch, but I'm not letting my elbow lift or my body move. So the upper arm of the working arm stays stable. You just go out to a full flex and contraction. So that is the last movement I'll use. Now a fun tip for this one is actually how you hold on to it. So the working hand, if I'm gonna spin around and do my other side now, if I wrap my hand all the way around where my pointer finger stays wrapped, like this, when I'm in that stretched position, let me just show you on this side again. So if I'm in this position, when I squeeze out, this is relatively comfortable here. The rope pushes into that gap between your thumb and your finger, but that's a pretty squishy gap. We can handle that, there's some tissue there. So when I have it here, I can handle that pressure. When I come back, my pointer finger sometimes feels almost like it's restrictive because inside where my hand is, the rope is turned like this. So my hand would be on here, and due to the position of my pointer finger, the rope has to be kind of in this bend. That is gonna create a lot of pressure on my pointer finger because the rope is gonna want to straighten out due to the tension. So where my pointer finger is, it's almost creating a ton of pressure to have to push that rope down. So I give up my pointer finger. Rather than wrapping it around, I'll actually let go of it and have it released. But this feels weird, just like you're, pow, shooting a gun out in the middle of nowhere. So I'll wrap my thumb here, and then I take my pointer finger and wrap it over my thumb, just loosely, like that. So the pointer finger is over the thumb. Now, when I'm in this position, there's less pressure across my fingers, and I can feel more isolation into my actual tricep. So just that little bit of a change of grip can help you better feel the tricep and handle heavier weight loads as you would progress in this movement. So coming in a little closer, instead of holding the rope with all four fingers wrapped like this, I'm going to release my pointer finger, wrap my thumb, and then wrap my pointer finger over my thumb, like that. And that's gonna give me a much better grip, get rid of that pressure that your pointer finger is going to feel. So we're gonna do that for a couple sets of 10 to 20 reps, and that'll be our last tricep movement. My last bicep movement is gonna be just normal dumbbell curls, but I do play with it a little bit in technique. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna do kind of a rep drop on each set. So I'll grab the dumbbells. Let me just practice with the 20s. So I'll show you with the 20s is I'm going to do opposing, like alternating, but I'm going to do 5 reps on one arm. So there's 1, 2, and I go nice and slow. Make sure I milk out that eccentric, get real good stress there. There's 4 and 5, and then I'll rotate and let that arm relax. I'll then lean into the side I'm gonna work on. So I'll do this side now for 5. So I lean into it so that way my shoulder joint is over my elbow. If I were to stand straight and curl, it just kind of feels weird. I don't get as good of an isolation. So we'll call this number 5. So I did 5 and 5. I'm now gonna lean into this one and I'm gonna do 4 reps like this. Now, if you're looking at it from an angle, I have a good stretch at the bottom, but I'm not letting my arm relax. So I wanna maintain tension. So we'll call that 3, 4. And then I'm gonna switch back to this side. Again, 1, not release at the bottom, 2, 3, 4. And then I would come back to this side and do 3 reps, 1, 2, 3, and then I'll go back to the other side. The idea of doing multiple reps per arm and then rotating is it allows me to really get the best of this eccentric. That eccentric between the reps is what really helps create growth as it pulls open the muscle. So rather than just going back and forth like this, if you notice, I'll come up, and then as I'm coming down, my hand rotates and I lean away. You're losing the eccentric there. So if I get it to here and I keep my hand flat all the way down, that is a much better eccentric load, and you're gonna get much better growth. So in that example, I did 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. So I'll put these down. And what I typically will do is sometimes I'll just do 3 on each side for 5 sets. So 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Or I'll do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I might even do like 2 sets of 4, 2 sets of 3, 2 sets of 2. So 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, double it up. However, the idea is I have fun with it, have some variety. I tend not to go higher than 5 per arm, so that way I can stay relatively heavy, relative to me. If I'm doing like 10 reps on one arm, then 9, then 8, the rep count is so high that the weight you're gonna use is gonna be arguably too low to create great benefit. So I usually will cap it at 5. I'll do 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, any combination there. But the idea is you're getting that eccentric stretch between the reps, and that's gonna help you get that growth. Now remember on these as well, to hold the dumbbell in your finger, not in the palm of your hand, and that's gonna again help you get that better isolation into the bicep. So give all of these movements a try. We had 3 biceps, 3 triceps. This is a great arm workout. This is what I do all the time. I've helped build my arms up. I am not as lean as I want to be, but I do have over 20-inch arms. And I remember when I started at 16 years old, I had like 13-inch arms. I had arms that were probably the size of my forearms now, my wrists, I mean. So it works. I've seen it work for myself. I've seen it work for clients, where you take the time, do these movements in an isolative fashion, very controlled. Let your heavy chest movements, let your heavy back movements be the biceps and tricep, kind of heavy compound work. And then when you're doing arm work, make sure it's very isolative and you can feel that mind-muscle connection in everything you do. Hopefully this was helpful. Give these tips a try. If you have any questions, if you need anything, just comment in the video or reach out on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Awesome. Thank you for watching.